Hi, welcome to the small shed. This week we're having a look and seeing how I correct some of my mistakes again. See you in a minute. Now this is the second one in 3 I think I'm doing on mistakes I've made when I've been making the bus, but they're not specifically mistakes that I've made on the bus. They're just things that happen in everyday woodworking or butchery, and it's how to get out of them sometimes that's more important than making the mistake itself. So we're going to have a look at some of the things I've done and how I've got out of them, and as I say, it applies to most other items that you're working with. Principally in this case it's probably mainly only things that are going to be painted, because I can cover up filler and that. I'm not dealing with high quality bits of wood that is more difficult to repair, so we'll perhaps get onto that another day if I get onto that sort of work. I'm going to start off having a look at a problem I had with the routering on the bus. I've used a very fine V-cut bit on the router to do all the panelling on the sides, and I suspected that I would have the odd mistake that I would make, and sure enough I did. Following along a straight edge with the router, you've got a guide on the side of the plate at the bottom, but if you happen to get that slightly rotated at all, you can see it pulls the centre of the router away from the line it's meant to be on, so you get a bulge in the line or something, and that's what's happened here on this piece. You can see that the router itself has left almost like another track alongside the one it should do, and all I could do with that is to fill it and recut it, and to do that I've used super glue, the usual. I just flooded the area with a little bit of very thin super glue, and then I've dropped in some of the dust that I had left over from the guitar build, but you could use any sort of sawdust or MDF dust even. I've just pressed that down into the damaged area, flattened it in, and then gently brushed it off with a bench brush effectively before it had fully set, but you can still get most of the residue off, and then squirt it with a can of the activator that I use with the cyanoacrylate glue, and that gives you almost a rock hard finished area that is slightly protruding from the surface of the MDF, but it's then simple enough to get a small sander on it and just quickly flatten it back to normal surface level, and then you can go back and run through it again with the router, and that'll give you your straight line back, and once it's painted you can't see any of the problems that you've had. Now the other problem I had with the router was digging in slightly into the surface of whatever I was doing when I was doing an edge straightening out or flush trimming, and occasionally I got a little nick into the actual side of the MDF. That one's a fairly straightforward one, it's just a bit of filler really, so I'll just show you how I've done that one on one of the windows that I cocked up. Right, so next problem area I've got is there where I can't remember, I think the router just caught it, but it's taken the finish off, and that's a fairly straightforward one to deal with. Straight bit of filler, put it in there, leave it to go off for a bit, and then we can sand it smooth afterwards. This is where MDF is quite forgiving. A bit too big for using sawdust and super glue. That'll take an hour or two to go off, and then we just come back and sand it up. Once again, any old credit cards, ideal for this sort of thing. It's an old bus pass. There we go. Now the next problem is that I've got a couple of unsightly gaps here on the front where it does show up. That side is perhaps more like it should look. There's another piece goes in there, obviously, but that's tidier. This is caused by two things. Firstly, I drilled out for a bolt through there and caught the side of the opening there. I can do that with filler, that's not a problem. I've done that before with other bits. The bit at the top I'm not so sure about. I don't think I can really satisfactorily put a filler in there. And this is caused by obviously there's a bow, this long inner piece that stretches the length of the bus. It's 8 foot long. And I've either not got the rails straight when I did it, or I've somehow got a bend in it so that the thing rocks in the middle. And normally I could just recut that straight and it would drop down fine, but that would then give me all sorts of problems, having to redo all the top again. So all I'm going to do with that is on the very end of this piece, perhaps 6 or 7 inches long, I'm going to get a piece of MDF very thinly cut, and I'll put that in, or slightly thicker than that, and then glue it on and sand it, and I don't think it will be seen from then on in. So all I've got to do really is measure the depth that I need for that spacer and cut myself a little thin sliver and just put along there, and that will solve the problem, I think. So with everything stripped out, all the bed supports and everything, I can see where the problem is now. There's a cut on that top piece that is slightly tapered on the end. I think, as I say, I've got the one of these two pieces, I've got the festool track slightly out, and it's just gone off on the skew down the end. Now this doesn't matter because there are 2 layers of MDF covering all that up, so that's not a problem. It's only on this front edge that you see the problem. So I'm just going to cut a short wedge shaped piece that will go into there, and will fit on, probably on the bottom piece. I don't know yet whether I'll put it on the top or the bottom, but that will just drive in, and when it's sanded you won't really notice it, and certainly from the front there's just a short piece on the front that you won't see, but it will make that gap a lot better. A little bit of glue just to stick it to the bottom area. Sorted. Now that's another classic example of a cock-up that I made fairly early on. I put a line up the side of the bus, all the way up, to mark the positions for this centre partition that goes in here, and I drilled the bottom two out and cut them out, and without thinking about it I actually ended up putting the other one on the opposite side of the line, which screwed it up completely. Now it doesn't matter because it's inside a cladding piece anyway, but what I've done actually now is to make a completely new piece up there that fits in okay. Nobody will know any different, and what it actually does is clamp that piece between that, and I can just put a screw through and it locates it just as well as if I'd put a dowel on it there. So sometimes you can get round things by just thinking about it a bit and redoing it. And then finally there are the threaded inserts. I had hoped I'd be able to get those in with about a 15mm hole drilled through, and then it would be concealed on the inside, but that hasn't proved the case. The inserts are quite deep, and they almost come out the back. So what I'm left with is a series of holes on the inside that will actually show. So rather than fill them and sand them and try and cover them up, because I don't think that will work very well anyway, I've got some small plugs which I've found for 8mm holes, and essentially all I'm going to do is find a space and a hammer. But all I'll do with those is when we assemble it, I shall just put the plugs in and just push those in, and effectively that'll just look as if it was always meant to be. So if you can't always cover your mistakes up, sometimes it's an idea just to celebrate them and effectively highlight them, and people will just think it's part of the original plan. So that's fixing the mistakes for this week. I've got another one to do, as I say, with some more different sort of scenarios. Hopefully next week we'll be on to actually painting the bus, step closer to finishing it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Look forward to seeing you next week. We'll see you then. Bye.